And that's right. Welcome, Martin. The floor is yours.
Sharing my screen. Do you all see my screen?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be talking about my favorite topic, sprint goals. How do you drive more value at sprint goals? Or if you're a product owner like I am, how can you be as lazy as possible so that the teams can make as many decisions without needing you? Or if you're a scrum master, how can you empower them so they make the best decisions? Or if you're a business person, how do you help them so that they can deliver as much value as possible? Or to put it in simple words, how can we do better than keeping the hamster wheel turning? How can we really make products that make a difference? So I wrote the book on sprint goals, which isn't that hard because there's only one book on sprint goals. But what's really interesting is number one question I received while I was writing a book on sprint goals was, how can you write a whole book on sprint goals? Ouch, that kind of hurts when people said that, but I understand it, right? Because I was actually a sprint goal skeptic. I didn't get them. It didn't make sense to me. What's the point of a sprint goal? And basically the way I worked with them is I was just repeating what was already in a sprint. And I was just thinking, what's the point of having something that's just repeating what you already know? We already know what we're going to do. And then something happened that changed my mind completely. So what's very interesting, I was working at a big corporation. And as you know, big corporations, there's lots of meetings, lots of processes. And I was suddenly moved teams and they said, you're not allowed to help your old team. And here's the catch. They didn't have a product owner. So they came to me and you can imagine the developer came to my desk, like complaining like, oh, we don't have a product owner. What do we do? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like thinking, yeah, they're screwed. I cannot help them. So I felt kind of sad and I kind of listened to him and I said, well, why not try setting a single sprint goal? Just set an objective, talk to your stakeholders, ask what's the one most important thing we could be working on now. And yeah, so he was like, okay, we're going to try that. So what's very interesting is he came back to my desk a few months later. So this was, of course, around like before Corona times. So people were in the office very often. And he started speaking faster and excited. And he was like, life is great. We're working better than ever. And our stakeholders are super happy. And I was just sitting there in silence and thinking, what the hell happened? It didn't make any sense to me. And I was also thinking, what the hell had I been doing as a product owner? They didn't need me. So then I kind of started asking questions and I realized that it really helps to have really clear goals. And then something else happened. I was again moved teams. Welcome to the life of big corporations. And what happened is I was moved teams and there was literally nothing. I was moved to a finance team. There was no product backlog, no products, no product vision. There was literally nothing, but we had a team. That's all we had. We didn't even know what the biggest problems were. And of course, we had a scrum master, and the scrum master came to my desk once again, and he was super stressed. He was like, yeah, we don't have a product backlog. What do? We need to start the sprint. We need to have a definition ready, definition of done, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, 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 no. We're not going to do any of those things. We're going to try something new. So what did we do? We talked to the stakeholders and just asked, hey, what's the biggest problem you're currently facing? We had conversations. And then I started, after a few conversations, I found out that the current most annoying thing they were facing is monthly closure. So if you work in finance, you need to close the month. And it was taking way too much time. It was taking like 5 days and it should be done in like 1 or 2 days. And then I started kind of digging deeper, like, hey, what's the problem? Well, there are all these manual reports and it sucks, Excel sheets, you know the drill. So I then went to the team and said, okay, so I figure out the biggest problem. I have no clue if we can fix the problem. I have no clue how to fix it, but at least we know this is going to make their life the happiest. So I said, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start a sprint. We're going to do a proof of concept. We're going to automate one of those reports. And I don't even care which one. You can decide. The easiest one probably, it makes the most sense, but you decide. And I also said, if we deliver nothing during the sprint, also fine. As long as we discover what are the roadblocks, we just get started and we'll see. And here's what happens. We started the sprint with one ticket. We're a small team with like 4 people working together. We collaborated, and we actually discovered that after the spike, hey, we can grab all the data. We know we can produce the report. And at the end of the sprint, we had automated a single report in production, and our stakeholders were immediately super happy and they were super surprised. And yeah, I was also surprised because basically we would have done what the Scrum Master said. We would have maybe had a team charter or a definition of done or all these things, but we wouldn't have something delivered something most likely. And then I had an epiphany. I suddenly realized why this works so well. And I will explain you why. I will get back to that later. But before we do that, maybe let's make it a little bit more interactive. So you can write in the chat. So which belief applies more to your daily work? So think about it. And I know life isn't black and white and you do different kinds of work, but just bear with me. Belief A, with the right amount of expertise and preparation, we can make awesome plans that don't have to change. And belief B, no matter what you do, your plans are going to suck. You will need to change them, even with the best people and infinite time to prepare. So please write in the chat, what do you think more fits with your current teams, A or B? Please write in the chat. I'll wait. Somebody has written. That's great. There are people listening. Awesome. Okay. And now I'm kind of change the situation. What do your stakeholders believe? Your most important stakeholders. Is your answer the same, or do they look at what you're doing in a different way? Please write in the chat. Does this affect your answer? Does it change anything? Yeah, I'll leave some time. Awesome. So what's very interesting is I've actually worked at big companies, small companies, and especially at bigger companies. This is something I've seen very often, this conflict of beliefs. So basically, very often people in the C-level believe we can make awesome plans if we have enough time, we have the right expertise. And this is actually what happens when you do that. So basically what happens is we fail to meet the roadmaps and timelines. Management is angry and they tell the people, your plans suck. You need to do a better job of planning. And everybody goes in the meeting rooms talking for days. And then we inject our plans with noise and speculation. They become disconnected from reality, and our plans actually act like an anchor that like makes collaboration more difficult. And then we're locked into these plans that prevent us to learn, prevent us from discovery, and then we fail to meet our plans and roadmaps and timelines. And I've actually seen this happen like 10 times or 12 times working at the same company. Insanity, just sitting weeks talking about stuff. And so why does this happen? It's because we love going down the road of a great plan. Our brain is built for prediction, for planning, for looking ahead. We love certainty. But the moment uncertainty enters the equation, we don't like uncertainty. Then we need to think, how can we remove the uncertainty? What can we do about it? How can we get rid of the dragon? And we're not going to go there. We're like, nope, nope, nope. Let's go in the meeting room and talk and think it over. And that's why we actually end up with that planning cycle of madness. And what's very interesting is, and I want to stress, I am not going to glorify warfare in any way, but where they dealt with this problem the earliest, this planning problem, is military warfare. And in military warfare, they actually discovered that, and this was General Karl von Clausewitz, he was a German general, and he actually said, everything in war is simple, but even the simplest things become difficult. And the force that makes simple things difficult is friction. And if there were no friction, then what you come up with on paper, the plan, you can execute it, life's going to be great, but friction is the thing that actually causes the difference between real war and war on paper. And the examples he uses for, let's say, the ground is a little bit muddy. So the horses, they arrive 3 hours later, can totally change the course of battle. Or there's a little bit of fog. So you've positioned your artillery on the mountains, but they don't see anything. So they're not going to fire. So this is friction. And basically, the more friction you have, the more surprises you have. And the more surprises, the more your plans will have to change. And in the military, they fixed this problem because actually the German army, they started the concept of Auftragstaktik. So basically, every mission has a commander's intent. What are we trying to achieve? And why does it matter? What is the relevant context? And this is a very good example from D-Day. So they were trying to secure key bridges, road junctions, and other locations in Normandy. Why? Because they wanted to allow the ground invasion forces to advance inland. And the people that were actually on the battlefield, they were making the plans based on this commander's intent. And they were also allowed to adjust the plans in line with this commander's intent. So imagine that all the bridges would have been destroyed and they could not advance and land. Then they knew they would have a problem. And then they could think about it because they understood, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. And that's why it suddenly all clicked in my head. Because in the army, they don't give plans, they give missions. The people that do the work or they're on the battlefield, they come up with plans because they want meeting the objective to be more important than following the plan. You might know these quotes, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Mike Tyson. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. Your plans have to change. And to be able to change your plans, you need to have a goal or a commander's intent. And to make it very clear, right, to explain the concept of friction, because if you understand it, it will make your life a lot easier. If what you're doing is clear, it means there's no friction, which means it's obvious for anyone, no matter their expertise. You can perfectly plan and predict. You don't have a fog beforehand. So the fog beforehand means before starting, there's a fog. You cannot remove it until you do stuff, and then you discover what's going on. You don't have the fog of speculation. So remember the planning of cycle of Magus. If you overthink things, then actually you introduce a new fog, the fog of speculation. But that all doesn't happen when you're clear. So what do? Look at the stairs, right? You see all the steps, follow the steps, and life is going to be great. The sun is shining, not a worry in the world. But if what you're doing is complicated, so let's say there's a little bit more friction, then you're going to have a little few surprises for experts. So you need to have expertise. And if you don't have expertise, then you will have the fog of beforehand, you will have the fog of speculation, and things will go wrong. Good example is making espresso or a cappuccino with a fancy machine. I have one at home. Whenever I have guests, I'm the one making the cappuccino because I'm the expert in the house. And if I would tell my mom, make a cappuccino for me, forget about it. She will not know the steps you have to follow. So you need to have a certain expertise. And if you have that, you can plan and predict, and in life, it will be pretty good. If what you're doing is complex, which means you're going to have many surprises, no matter your expertise, so this is kind of the realm of software development often, then even with expertise, you will have the fog beforehand. You don't know everything before starting. If you plan too much, or overthink, you're going to have the fog of speculation, and you should expect your plans and actions to not produce the desired results. A good example is the Jaws movie. So the Jaws movie was one of the first summer blockbusters ever, but making the movie was actually a total disaster. It was a nightmare. So this was a movie made by Steven Spielberg. He was already an expert filmmaker. He was not extremely famous yet, but he already had made a lot of movies and TV series. And actually, during filming, they discovered two things. The whole movie relied on a mechanical shark, Bruce, which kept breaking down. And the other problem was they were filming at sea, which meant the light changed all the time. So it was very difficult to stitch different shots back together. So long story short, the movie was like triple over budget. Steven Spielberg got a PTSD. And but what did Spielberg do is actually he spent the nights rewriting the script based on the fact that you couldn't see the shark. And ultimately, the movie was a great success because he was able to adapt to the situation. Now, what you're doing is in the chaos realm, which means there are going to be surprises, no matter your expertise. You need to do something and get to a more predictable state. It's kind of like imagine like in the room of Alexander, the water pipe bursts. You're going to see his face. He's going to be like, panicking. He's going to act. He's not going to sit there and think, what do I do? So, long story short, more friction, more surprises, and the lower your predictability and your ability to make strong plans. So maybe what happens when you do too much planning and we're doing complex work? We have a few people, so maybe somebody wants to speak if they dare. And you will be, I will wait a little bit, and otherwise I will continue if people are scared.
Hello,
Hello, Roman.
I'm here. Yeah, I could just say by my in my own example of work, I faced such a thing when you have too much planning and it just takes a bit of time from your team
Yeah,
to do what you plan,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah. So it's going to take longer.
Yeah,
So basically, you're going to get in that planning cycle of madness, right? You're going to make plans which are actually worse and disconnected from reality. So Roman, I'm going to use you a little bit now. I have you, if you're okay with that.
that's
So
okay.
what happens when you're doing too little planning and your work is actually complicated, which means there are going to be few surprises for experts. And if you have experts, you can plan and predict pretty well. What happens when you don't plan enough?
It still takes the same amount of time, but for asking questions.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so yeah, you'll have to ask questions. I mean, basically, if you don't plan enough, you're going to encounter surprises that you could have seen coming with the right expertise and planning. So, what I want to stress is what's a good idea in one situation might not be a good idea in another situation. Yeah. And I'll just continue a little bit. Thank you, Roman. I'm not going to use you more. What happens when you lack expertise and you're doing complicated work? Then it will appear as complex, right? Because it will appear unpredictable. It will appear like there are many surprises, but actually you need to get experts. You need to get people that know what they're doing. So it's very important to be aware of this. Something can appear as complex, but actually be complicated because you simply lack expertise. So how does friction impact your plans, action, and results? So if you don't have a lot of friction, then plan different approaches work fine. We know what we must do, execute the plan, few surprises. You might need experts, but you can follow the plan. Life's going to be pretty good. But the moment you have too much friction, you're entering the realm of the complex. Then you need a goal. And by doing the work, you will discover the work you have to do. Doing exposes reality. And you will have many surprises, and you must trust the goal and adjust your plans based on the terrain, based on what you encounter. And that's why you need a goal that's separate from your plan, because your plan will have to change. So if what you're doing is clear or complicated, you don't need Agile. You just need a good plan. You need experts. Trust the plan. Life's going to be good. Sorry. But if what you're doing is complex, then you need a goal-driven approach. And if what you're doing is chaos, you actually need to get to a more stable situation. So long story short, what you're doing is complex. There are many things you don't know. You're going to have many surprises. And then if you overthink stuff, you do too much planning, you actually make things worse. You get speculation and noise, you get false assumptions. So what we should be doing instead, and I call this humble planning, we should start with simple plans that we make more elaborate as we do the work. Every step we take should help shape the way, and guided by clear goals and product goals, it will reduce what we don't know. Because every time we take a step, we actually remove a little bit of the fog of beforehand. We discover what's really going on, and we can use that to create better plans. And I want to stress, this doesn't mean humble planning doesn't mean to not plan or to plan less. It means to plan later at a point of time when you actually know more. So I want to stress, I wrote a book. It's very easy to take the wrong approach. So when you write a book, you actually have to sign a contract. It's pretty obvious, but you actually have to supply timelines. And I actually spent one weekend writing the book, finished like 20%. So I kind of guessed, okay, it's going to take like 7 months. So how many of these 3 timelines do you think I hit? Roman, maybe you can speak.
Actually, I have no clue how many.
Yeah, oh, that's fine. Okay, so I'll give you the answer. I only hit the first timeline. And why was that? I finished it before signing the contract.
Okay.
And I want to stress, right? I don't know if this was because it was my first book. I lacked expertise, but I want to stress, even despite me knowing all these things, you can really still take the wrong approach. You can do over the confident planning. So how do we fix this, right? And I would explain it. You need to start with humble plans. Every step we take helps ships to obey. Plan more later when you know more. And you need to lead with context, with intent. What are we trying to achieve? And why does it matter? So the sprint goal is actually the commander's intent of the sprint. Pretty obvious. It just tells the team, hey, what are we trying to achieve this sprint? And what is the relevant context so that they understand why this goal is valuable. That's all a sprint goal does. But how do you create a good sprint goal? And I came up with an acronym. It's called FOCUS. And you can use it to come up with better sprint goals. So is your sprint goal fun? So do you have a funny title or at least a memorable title? Because then people will talk about it and then it will be in their minds. Nobody remembers smart sprint goals like reduce conversion by 2%. Like if you have a nice name, like, I don't know, how do you, like Fight Club, you know what I mean? They had a name. So then people talk about it. I forgot, Project Mayhem, I think that was the name of the movie Fight Club. So people will then talk about it. Outcome oriented. So what are we trying to achieve? Collaborative. You make the goal together. Ultimate. Why are we doing this? What's the ultimate reason? Singular. One thing, not two things. One objective, because the moment you have multiple objectives, then you get problems because people are going to stretch themselves thin. So maybe this is a good example. So this is a real world sprint goal on the post-its. Finalize last name search and first name morphology. Index 80% of remaining data. 3 other stories. Establish search replication validation protocol. Refactor artifact dictionary schema. I'm already falling asleep when I read this sprint goal. It's terrible. So maybe let's start, right? Does it contain a fun or memorable title? Absolutely not. If I read this, and even if I read it 20 times, I'm going to remember nothing. Is it outcome oriented? Absolutely not. Collaborative? Did they create it together? Maybe. Ultimate, do we know why this matters? Do we know why we need to index 80% of the data? We have got no clue. Is it a single objective and not a list of unrelated objectives? Well, no, it's a list of objectives. So I hope I can show you, this shows you, you can very easily check. And by the way, this is a real world example from SAFe. This is what SAFe tells you is a good sprint goal. So here's a good example, I think. So this is a real world example. I had a sprint goal, but we came up with make onboarding great again. So we actually discovered many people in a project management tool were actually not finishing their onboarding, and we knew it had a big impact on retention. So yeah, basically we came up with an idea of how can we improve the number of people that could actually create a project within 30 days after signing up. And if we did that, we knew the retention would be good. So this is a good example of a good sprint goal because it tells you what we're trying to achieve. And it has a funny title and which people will talk about. So I want to stress, right? Many teams struggle to use sprint goals. And that's because the inability to set good sprint goals says something about your situation. Let's say, for example, you have too many competing priorities, it will be very hard to set a clear sprint goal. Let's say you're a feature factory where people have already decided the features you're going to build. Then, yeah, you don't know what the feature is trying to achieve. Good luck setting a sprint goal. If you're a component team, which is just delivering technical tasks for other teams, and you have many silos, then how can you set a sprint goal because you're delivering like stuff other teams need? If you're working on a product that's late in the product lifecycle with all these tiny improvements that don't relate to each other, it will be hard to set a sprint goal. If you've got a super big team with 20 people, which I've seen, then it's hard to have a goal for 20 people. You know, it makes sense. Or if you're focused on keeping everybody 100% busy, like let's say you have a small team, you want to make sure that everybody has 100% planned work. Yeah, you're going to struggle to use sprint goals. So if you cannot use sprint goals, you've got a problem and you need to think about what's going on. And yeah, so one thing I forgot to say is a team is a group of people working towards a common goal. If you don't have a common goal, you don't have a team. And it's something you have to think about. Hey, why don't we have a common goal? Okay, so maybe I will walk through some common sprint goal mistakes to help, because this is probably a bit theoretical. So let's make it a bit more practical. Does everything in your sprint have to relate to the sprint goal? No, right? Because the main purpose of the sprint goal is to make meeting objective more important than following the plan. It doesn't mean you cannot do any other things. It just means if everything goes to hell and the plan goes entirely different than expected, then we're going to focus on the one most important thing. And the other thing, which is really crucial, after the sprint starts, time, quality, and resources are fixed. So scope must be flexible. The sprint goal is what helps make that scope flexible. And if you don't make the scope flexible, you have technical debt often. Another mistake is beginning talking about the sprint goal at sprint planning. I know the Scrum Guide says the sprint goal is finalized at sprint planning, but it is the commitment of the team. So the stakeholders have to know what are you committing to, because that's usually what they want to know. What are you working towards? So the best place to actually start talking about the sprint goal is the sprint review. You should already talk about, hey, this is what we're thinking about for the next sprint goal. Tell them it might change. Ask them, is this really the most valuable thing? But it's really crucial that you manage those expectations, because that's what you're committing to. You're not committing to 10 user stories totally unrelated to each other. The other mistake is, and I call this anaconda style versus hummingbird style Scrum. So you know an anaconda, right? Anaconda is a snake, eats a goat, and then they don't have to eat for weeks. Well, a hummingbird, they go from flower to flower, every few minutes. They take small bites. So lots of Scrum teams, they're like that anaconda. They start the sprint, 10 tickets in the sprint, and then finish those 10 tickets. Actually, what you should be doing is planning gradually. So only pull in the work that you need for the first few days, because you don't know how big it is. You don't know everything there is to know. And then as you complete work, you drag in more work. And that's, I call that hummingbird style sprint. So instead of trusting your estimates, you trust the reality of the work. And that's why you should pull the work in. The other mistake is reverse engineering outcomes from features you intend to deliver. So if you decide to deliver certain features, and then you tell the team, these are the features you have to deliver, and then they set sprint goals, that makes zero sense, because you only know the features, but you don't know what they're supposed to achieve. So you're just going to rub your crystal ball and be like, okay, maybe these are the outcomes. So don't do that. Then just have a sprint goal that focuses on delivering those features, and don't make stuff up unless you know that's what they are supposed to achieve. Yeah, so features don't deliver value. It's what the feature makes possible. And that's why you should start the other way around. The other biggest mistake is don't do sprint goals because they're part of the Scrum Guide. Because as I told you before, there are situations where using sprint goals doesn't make sense. But I want to stress, if sprint goals don't make sense, it may also mean that Scrum doesn't make sense for your situation. Because the starting point of Scrum is a team with a common goal. And if you don't have a common goal, then you really need to scratch your head and think about, should we be using Scrum? Because you're not going to get the benefits of Scrum. And to hammer the point home, every Scrum event relates to the sprint goal. Sprint planning, right? You set the sprint goal and you make an initial plan for meeting that sprint goal. The daily Scrum, you change your plans to optimize the probability of making a product increment that realizes the sprint goal. The sprint review, you improve the value delivered by talking about the product increment that should realize the sprint goal. And then you adapt the product backlog. Sprint retrospective, improve your way of working so you increase the chances of delivering a valuable product increment that meets the sprint goal for future sprints. And even the sprint cancellation, the only reason for canceling the sprint. So anyhow, I hope the point is hammered home. Every event relates to the sprint goal. So if you don't have a sprint goal, yeah, it's difficult to do Scrum. Well, you actually can't do Scrum. So that's what I always say. The sprint goal is the leitmotif of Scrum. So maybe if you see these pictures, right, the Batman lights, you might hear the Batman theme, or when you see Darth Vader, you hear duh, 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 duh. So that's the leitmotif. So in classical music, that's a recurring theme. In Scrum, that recurring theme, that Darth Vader theme, is the sprint goal. It comes back in every event. So sprint goals are super demanding. They're the cherry on the cake. So if you have Calico Cat sprints where you're actually working on all these random things and you cannot fix it, reconsider using Scrum, because you cannot use sprint goals. You don't really have a team. So maybe Kanban is a better fit. You just manage the flow. If you're a feature factory and you don't really understand what you're trying to achieve, then start with doing discovery, start with talking to customers, understand the outcomes, because otherwise you're just going to be inventing fake outcomes, and that doesn't really help. It just takes a lot of time. And if you really do discovery and you really understand the outcomes you're trying to achieve, then it makes sense to have outcome-oriented sprints and to use sprint goals that follow focus. So in conclusion, if you remember one thing about this talk, the more you try to prevent sucking at predicting, the more you will guarantee to suck at adapting. And that's a very complicated sentence, but maybe to rephrase it, if you really do your best to not make mistakes in prediction, you're actually going to make plans that set you up for failure, and you're going to be worse at adaptation. You're going to be worse at acting in the moment. And that's why you should let the plans emerge as you do the work, guided by sprint goals and product goals. And don't believe me, just try them out and see if they work. I'm not dogmatic about anything. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But try it out. That's all I would like to say. Thank you very much. And I'm very curious for if there are any questions or remarks.
Well, that was briefly explained everything that we need to know before we buy and read the book. And I have to mention something which was in my eye from the very first time. For those who had opportunity to read book called Coaching of an Agile Team, from Agile Humans, of course, from it's practically the same design of the book, which was really catchy for my eye. When I saw the first page of Martin's book, I was like, is it the same book? But no, it's not the same book. It's just similar. Yeah, so we are lucky to have one more book as a suggestion for everybody who really do pay attention to develop and to learn something new from agile environment, which I mean, it's practically important. So for those who would like to ask any questions, be free to do that. Martin is here with us and he won't leave before you have opportunity to ask him any question. So if there is anybody, I don't want to steal the opportunity for that person to ask the question. So yeah. Roman, maybe you, because I think that you are pretty talky tonight. So you can ask the question if you like.
I actually don't have a question because it was pretty clear all the way through. So I want to thank you first for the presentation. It was very good. And yeah, I catch myself on the thought that I already do like implement here and there the stuff that you are talking about, but I don't have maybe like a clear overview, like the main thought of my process. I don't have the thought of the process that I try to implement. So yeah, I catch like a few things from your presentation, and I screenshotted it to then tell it to my team and to form my thought even more clear for them, because yeah, I do have the situation that you are talking about with too many things in like in the top priority all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to be very, very clear, and I'm trying to, and it's very, very hard. That you are already mentioned also that it takes a lot of effort to set the sprint goals. So I'm trying to, and I'm trying to be more clear, and I'm trying to all the stuff that I could. But yeah, it's still hard. And thank you for your presentation. I saved some thoughts.
Yeah.
It was great.
Thank you for sharing. And you're all going to get the slides. I will share the slides. So that's all
Thank you.
cool. So I want to stress, I think one of the biggest problems I always see, and it doesn't have anything to do with sprint goals, is high work in progress, aka working on too many things at the same time. I think this is the single biggest problem in IT because, coding stuff is slow and we always want to go faster. And what's the solution? We're actually going to work on more things, you know what I mean? Because we think it goes slow and then we go even slower. And it's very counterintuitive. Fixing that takes a lot of talking, like, hey, actually working on less means you will get more, because the point isn't to have busy people, but to have features that are busy receiving work. It's kind of like you have in a hospital. If all the doctors are busy, if all the machines are busy, the patients are going to die. You know what I mean? They're waiting because they're like, and that's, I think, is the key thing. Like, everybody struggles with this, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah, so we have one question from Miroslav in chat.
Yeah.
Martin, if you like, you can read it, or I can do.
Yeah,
so.
I can read it.
Okay.
So, how to introduce Agile in a non-Agile company which is not aware that it has a problem. Some good books on sprints and Agile.
Martin, sorry, before you start answering this question, I need to share feeling with Miroslav, because when you work in environment which would like to implement Agile, the most important problem usually would be that that company is not aware of need
Yes,
to
correct.
implement Agile. So this, what Miroslav wrote, is actually a typical reason and situation in almost every company before start thinking about Agile. So
Correct.
now you can answer.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So I think the key thing what to always start with is, so as you already said, right, they're not aware probably that they have a problem. So I think the most important thing is, I do a lot of consulting and I actually never talk about Agile. I never talk about the Agile manifesto. So what do I talk about is, I actually try to understand, what are your problems? You know what I mean? What is bothering you? Yeah, we're not delivering stuff on time, or it's going slow, and then you talk about that. And then you talk about why that's happening and what we can do about it. And if you do that really well, you don't even have to talk about Agile. And what I do is I talk about friction, you know what I mean? Like, hey, if you cannot plan and predict, then you need to work in a different way than if you can plan and predict. And that's what you do have to talk about. That's what they do have to understand. Because if they believe that the inability to plan and predict means that you don't know what you're doing, that you don't have experts, then they think that you're incompetent. You know what I mean? We have incompetent people. They're lazy, they're not work, whatever the reason, but the reason we're failing is that. But that's not the reason. The reason is we're working in a way which is incompatible with the kind of work we're doing. And that's what we have to fix. And that's a very difficult conversation, but that's what you should focus on, in my opinion.
If I can ask one question,
sure.
It's similar to this question. Let's play with words a little bit. So how to introduce Agile in a non-Agile company which is aware that has problem, and it recognizes Agile as a potential solution, but it won't implement it at all because it doesn't suit them so much to be implemented.
Yeah. So what's very interesting is, I actually wrote an article, and I can share it with you, introducing Scrum at a company where everybody hates Scrum. And I did that. So it's a very similar situation. You know how I did it? It was very interesting. So actually I worked at a startup. They grew from 100 to 300 people. For some reason, everybody hated Scrum. Fine, right? I didn't get the, and which is interesting, they didn't even know Scrum, but they hated it. They already, so things were not going that well. Like, delivery was going slow. And they had an office in Barcelona, and they basically said, hey, Maarten, like, do you want to help set up the office in Barcelona? Because it's not going so well at the moment. And I told them, yep, I can do that. I have one condition. I decide how with the office, right? Or we decide how we work. And then I will go. I will live there for half a year. And they said yes. And they allowed me to do that. And we did Scrum. And then what's very interesting is after 3 sprints, my manager came to me and said, all the teams have to do Scrum. How can we make it happen? Because the team was performing better than all the other teams. So yeah, and
That's a
that's
pretty happy
yeah,
solution for that. But I personally, me,
yeah,
through my working experience, had a diverse experiences
correct.
where you really do give your best to explain them or to introduce them
Yeah,
with an agile. And you, I think, about 1,000 times you say to them that this is only one of solutions they
yeah,
can implement, and then they are thrilled. They are very happy. They can't wait to form at least a pilot team to try Agile. But from that moment until the end, you have at least 1, 2, or 3 daily situations where someone, usually from top management, kidnap you and move you to a corner of the room and said, do we really need to do all of this? Can we do at least 2 stuff of
yes,
it?
true.
And believe or not, the very last situation I remember was very awkward. And that situation was like, I said to them, typical traditional style of clothing in corporate companies is something which is first thing I noticed when I entered Agile. That stuff, it's not so important. It's not a big deal how you look, actually. It's very
Correct.
important how you work in a team. So
Yes.
if you wear a tie or you wear a t-shirt, it doesn't matter. Nobody here would look at you nor commenting you. And that was like, yeah, it's a very great attitude. And the very next day when piloting came, that very person told me, I suggest you to wear a shirt because not all here is accepting a agile solution for wearing. And I was like, there is no agile solution for wearing. But yeah, okay, let's go slow. Okay.
But you're right. I think it's highly context dependent, and there will be ups and downs. But I do think a good strategy, if everybody is against something or like it's not, start with a pocket of goodness. Like a small
Yeah.
piece,
Mm,
preferably a little bit in isolation, which doesn't have the sea level. You know what I mean? Looking at you and being
mm,
annoying, but at
mm,
least that you can show that you are improving things,
mm,
that you have evidence that you can back it up, and then you go to the more difficult places. You know what I mean?
mm,
Where, but that I think that's always the best strategy. I honestly don't really believe in big bang, 10 teams at once.
mm,
It's I always say like first do things that don't scale. You know what I mean? Like, and then when they work, then scale them up. And I don't think it's a great idea to do these big bang things. I
mm.
mean,
I agree.
yeah. So scale as you solve problems, don't scale to solve problems. That's basically the approach.
That's right. That's totally right. That's right.
Yeah. Are there any questions? And
Guys,
otherwise,
are there any questions?
we'll call it a night or a day.
Yeah, it is still day in Serbia, but night hours, I
Yeah.
would say like that. Yeah.
Well,
Well, I suppose there is no more question. Or if you have any question and you want to write them personally, you can reach Martin on its LinkedIn. You have his profile. You can write to him. He is going to answer you whatever you need to know, or he needs to explain you in person, of course. So if we don't have any more question, I think it is the opportunity to close tonight's session. This was very brief, but very useful session, I would say. It was like a refreshing drink I would call it like that, because you don't spend too much time for drinking, but you feel refreshed after the
Yes.
session. So it was very great.
Thank you.
Martin, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your effort. The topic was very interesting. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will watch it on a YouTube channel tomorrow. I hope we will have opportunity to speak with you in other occasions, and I hope that you will visit Serbia soon. So that would be great. And on behalf of Agile Humans and my personal name, I would like to say thank you one more time, and I wish you to spend this weekend very well.
Thank
And
you.
please in rest.
Yeah. Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much, guys, for being part of this session, and have a great weekend, guys. See you next month. Thank you so much. Bye.